Hey guys. I was getting really nostalgic today about my time in Europe and all the museums that I visited, the famous artwork that I saw, and it led me to some reflection on my favorite pieces of artwork and what they have in common. So many of my favorites have depictions of very feminine women or women that exude femininity in some way. I began to think since women are failing to fulfill their most basic roles in society, men have become less incentivized by sex. Women are fatter and uglier now and less incentivized by marriage, probably because of no fault divorce. This must have been reflected in artistic expression through the years. This is a really loose hypothesis. I'm just turning this over with you guys because I thought it would be interesting. Maybe I'm wrong, and the ever eroding quality of Western art occurred independently from worsening gender relations. But seeing as how sex with beautiful women has been the number one motivator for most things since the beginning of time, I seriously doubt it. Let's take a look at some of the most famous pieces of art depicting female beauty. I always hear people say that the Mona Lisa is the most underwhelming piece of art that they've ever seen, but I think that it's likely because it's so much smaller than everybody anticipates. But it is arguably the most famous painting in the history of mankind for a reason. The painting was stolen twice, which did popularize it, but I think the real reason that people have an obsession and a fixation on this seemingly ordinary, well, as ordinary as a Da Vinci painting can be, is her enigmatic smile. Outside of the landscape background, which is unusual for portraiture, there is great mystery around this painting. People are transfixed by her somewhat suggestive facial expression. This was actually a technique used by Da Vinci in a few of his paintings, or at least one other, where through shading, he created the illusion of what has been called the uncatchable smile by art historians. She appears to be smiling, but when you look more closely, you can see that her mouth is actually slightly downturned on one side and is more relaxed than is perceptible to the viewer from a distance. This creates the illusion of a sly smile. And that is one of the biggest reasons for the obsession with the Mona Lisa. It is the mere suggestion, her coy facial expression. It is ever so slightly sexually charged, like she knows something that you don't, or she has a little secret. These suggestions of femininity, little hints of sexuality, used to be how women were depicted. Sexuality wasn't ignored, it just wasn't pornographic yet. But what is pornography? At what point does something become pornographic? Let's take a look at a famous Botticelli nude, The Birth of Venus. This is my favorite painting of all time. I've always loved the rich color scheme and all of the elements of femininity displayed. Her hair is so long and flowing, her porcelain skin. It's just so delightfully feminine. Yet despite the depiction of the nude goddess of love, this does not feel as highly sexually charged as one might imagine, and certainly does not meet the standards for pornography. Both the Mona Lisa and the Birth of Venus are 15th or 16th century Italian paintings, so I'm not sure that it is much of a sample to support my hypothesis. So maybe we should look at something from the Impressionist era, which, in my opinion, is right before things started falling apart. Impressionist paintings shifted more to a focus on everyday life. There's a lot of working class imagery and subject matter, so ironically, there is more realism in that way. But at this point, there was still largely a focus on beauty, despite the more somber subject matter. This is another one of my favorites that I saw on my trip in September. It is Manet's Olympia, and it is widely referred to as the most controversial painting of all time and was very poorly received at the time. I chose this because it depicts a literal prostitute that just finished with a client who is uninterested in flowers sent from one of her suitors. Instead, she stares unflinchingly, completely nude, but shoes and jewelry, right at the viewer. Yet still, the depiction of a literal prostitute is somehow less pornographic than your average modern art depiction of the female form. That is because, like the other paintings we've discussed, the subject matter is secondary to the representation of the female form, which is soft, enticing, visually pleasing. She draws you in. More than the subject matter, it is a celebration of her figure, her confidence, and her aggressive sexuality while retaining her femininity. This was painted in 1863, and there are still some beautiful representations of women in Western art between this time and around 1960 or so, when gender relations really very quickly began to erode. In the Mona Lisa, the Birth of Venus, and most paintings prior to the modern era, irrespective of subject matter, there is a reverence for women because women were still feminine and were holding up their end of the bargain. I know I talked about Carol Dunham in my video on modern art from last year, which I've linked below, but I cannot get over this guy. He is Lena Dunham's father, so by that standard, he already has done more harm in his life than good. But when you look at his body of work, he crosses over into the waste of human life category. I swear to God, you guys, I've linked it below. His work is like half buttholes, half ball sacks. It is the worst, most offensive garbage I have ever seen. He has so little creativity and talent that even the child that he produced is a worthless piece of shit. This is not unique to Carol Dunham. Distorted, oddly sexualized, clearly pornographic artwork is a modern art phenomenon that I really do believe is linked to the loss of male adoration for women. The element of romanticism helped to contain sexuality because women were seen as something to be cherished and the love of a good woman was a virtue. But I understand why men today don't really want to bother, and that cultural mentality, seeing the ugliness in women instead of their beauty, has led to them being reduced to masturbatory vessels in art. Art should be spiritually uplifting, even if the subject matter is grotesque. It should still manage to be beautiful. I long for that era. When I see the modern art that is being created and the art of the last 60 years or so, I can feel the angst and loss of hope in our civilization and sometimes in humanity. It used to be an expression of that which was good and virtuous and holy in society. Now it just captures our degeneracy. If we see a return to beauty in art, it will give me hope for our civilization. Maybe that is part of what we should be focusing on, looking to the past to find a path to return to beauty. But I would love to hear what you have to say in the comment section. If you have any ideas about this or other works of art that you'd like to discuss. This was just a fun little video that I've been turning over in my mind, so I thought I would finally make it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye.